Okay, welcome to Advisory Design Panel this Halloween, October 31st, 2019. We'll start with acknowledging that this meeting is being held on the Squamish traditional nation territory. First item is adoption of this agenda. I have someone, Sarah, second. Graham. Okay, all in favor? Adopted. Then we'll go on to the minutes from the previous meeting, October 17th. Any comments on those minutes from the panel? No? So we will move to adopt those minutes. Okay. David and Sarah. Yeah. Okay. And then we'll go on to business. First order of business is DP 490. 1606 Scott Crescent.
Hello everyone, my name is Carrie Hamilton. I'm a planner for the District of Squamish, and I'm the planner on this file for DP 490, and it's located at 1606 Scott Crescent. This is the second time this project has been presented to this panel, and we are currently looking. I just want to note a correction just in this report that I provided, just that at the last panel, the panel gave this development a review of C, which was that they generally supported the development but had a few conditions that they wanted to bring back and review. And in the report, it just said that they generally did not support. So I just want to clarify that language for everyone here. And some of the things that were discussed at the last meeting were building massing and breaking up some of that massing. This panel also had comments around the color palette used. There was comments around the commercial frontage and elevating that and bringing that to a little bit more detail to review as well. And then there was also comments around the building form and the look of this building from Highway 99 perspective. As per DPA 8 guidelines, it specifically speaks to that. So in this report, you'll also find just a few more things that staff noted. So staff are just looking for this panel to comment on a lot of the comments and the additions and changes that this applicant, that this development has made for this panel's review, specifically around material, color palette, and massing, so those comments, as well as they did make some significant changes to that commercial frontage, so we'd just love to see if the panel is supportive of those changes. They've also made changes to the play area, significant changes, so just would like to see if that's what the panel is looking for. And then staff have also noted just a few other areas in detail. This project is quite large, and just a few other aspects that staff wanted this panel to review. So that includes the outdoor covered spaces. So they have trellises in a lot of the outdoor spaces in the outdoor play area, the outdoor amenity space, and the rooftop. And we're just wondering if that's actually going to meet the development permit guidelines of covered outdoor space, because trellises are not typically covered that way. Would like to get some comments around stormwater management. So a lot of the landscaping that you see is going to be above an underground garage. And so just how well is those trees going to grow, and some of the details that we are currently just missing around soil volumes right now in these landscape plans. And then the last piece was around the loading bays. So staff have looked at the loading bay that's just outside the amenity space, and are just wondering if that's an appropriate space for that loading bay, and if it's better, if its intended use is to be for mail drop-offs or deliveries, if that's better service on that actual the pedestrian and emergency access road, rather than be a space right in front of that amenity space. And also wanted to just get the panel's thoughts and comments around just if the applicants are intending to have this be a brewery space, how functional that area is going to be, and how that use will be able to be accommodated with the existing loading bay space being kind of on the other side of that brewery, so in the commercial area. So there's two loading bays. So those are all of staff's just comments, just for things for the panel to focus in on. And we can pass it over to this wonderful team to explain the changes that they've made to this development.
So since we're on this rendering, can we get the lights off, and let's just talk about this one rendering right now. So the the loading bay we're talking about is that little kind of hammerhead surface turnaround that we've got there. Our thinking behind that was we really would like to keep the entire center of the project as a pedestrian zone, and we didn't want to have any vehicles in there. But we also recognize that these are the days of Amazon deliveries and a number of functions like that. And so we proposed a little surface lot that allows us the little T-shaped turnaround right there, just so that that truck could pull up. And actually Canada Post, it's really for Canada Post, Amazon, all these delivery type services, because in the amenity area, we have one of our 2 major parcel delivery locations, because we can only access the building in a couple of spots. So in the amenity, there's quite a large parcel delivery area, and really the intent of that is just for that purpose. Now, certainly the rendering probably doesn't have as much landscaping as Peter's going to give us.
No, architects always take it off the drawing so you can see the building. There is some planting in there.
Yeah, so Peter's going to have that well planted up, but that was really the purpose of it, and welcome to hear the comments from the panel. You'll also see behind it, there is that trellised area with an outdoor table that does have a glass, intended to have a glass roof. So the idea is it's a wood trellis, but it'll have a glass roof on it so we can keep that area dry. And I'm a firm believer in having covered outdoor space in our wet climates that we have. Certainly also the trellis that runs along the side that forms the entry has glass on it. On the roof, we had that rooftop. I mean, it's not on this particular rendering, but there is a rooftop amenity area. I'm happy to put a glass up there. It's really a building code question at that point, because we're getting various interpretations of that becoming a 7th story. So that's the problem with the roof, and I'm actually lobbying for building code change to allow us to do those kinds of things and properly sprinkle them and make sure they're safe and stuff. But it's that, you know, we know that's 10 years out. But anyways, that's sort of in terms of those issues. Now, the other comment that the panel had was to break up the massing a little bit. We went back to the team, and we generally liked the color palette we were working with, quite honestly, as a group, but we felt we could deploy it in a much different way. So in order to break up the massing, we've taken the building and we've actually, the building's kind of naturally split down the middle. Here, there's an actual, on this particular building, there's an actual level change right at that spot. The gap in the middle, we're actually now going to bring our stone material in there. So that's kind of this anchoring, heavy anchoring area to make those buildings feel like 2 separate buildings. And then we're putting one color scheme on each half. So this way we break up that mass of that building. So that's really our response to that comment from the panel. By the way, we actually appreciated the comments. We thought they were fair. And I think they have enhanced the project. The other one that came up was, I don't know if it shows up real well in this rendering, but there was some talk about bringing a little bit of industrial character into the project. And we had kind of this natural red highlight color that we were using here and there. And so what we've done is we've decided that our trellis, again, this is the idea of, which is part of the design guidelines to break the scale by tiering these kinds of projects. We have that long trellis that kind of runs on top of our first level at the base of the big buildings. And we've gone to a red iron on that. So it's going to be a red, bright red line that'll be done in red iron to support that trellis that Peter will then plant up and turn into a beautiful garden. So those are our major responses to those major conditions that come out of this rendering. Maybe just go to another rendering. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Can we go down, Joe, maybe find okay, so this rendering now is our response to the comment about having some, just a better aesthetic for the retail space. So what we've decided to do, and was suggested by the panel, bring some of that aesthetic for that interesting roof form we had on our amenity space, and we brought it to the end of the pub building, and then we've kind of framed a porch, right? The idea is it's this beautiful outdoor covered porch that people can kind of sit on, and when you're driving along the highway, although you can't stop there, you get this nice point of interest in the way that facade works. And it's again, the same material palette. And then if we go to the other rendering, we got that one. Okay, so the other thing we've done is we've actually lengthened the amount of glass facing the highway. So we've actually extended our retail space along the highway, and then that pitched roof kind of is like a little bit of a catcher to the eye as you come down the highway. We've still maintained a sitting area on the highway side. We still think that would add some nice animation to the entrance to Squamish. We brought our red color back into there. And then on the building itself, we've decided to color the end panel, bring our red into that one panel to give a little bit of impact to this side. And then we have brought some extra bouldering in to really make that base feel like it's kind of growing out of the rock. And then the concrete base, we've punched some holes in it. We're just debating how best to handle those holes, because I don't like looking into parkades and seeing ugly lights. So we want to have a nice screen or something in there too. I don't like seeing, I like the idea that some presence behind that, but I don't like to see terrible parkade lighting, which is typically what we have. So that's something we're just working on, making sure we get that right. We've also provided a signage, and we looked at a bunch of locations for signage. We felt that if we put it at the corner, it actually obscured the views up and down the highway. We thought it was a safety concern, so we brought it kind of to the joint between the retail and the parkade part of the project, and we've created a sign that, if you close up on it, it has Red Bridge at the bottom, just kind of signaling this. You kind of see this as a district now, the Red Ridge District, and then it'll have a little bit of signage just indicating what kind of businesses are in the space.
One thing we should keep in mind as you're looking at this rendering, though, is that there are some street trees as well as a row of planted and coniferous trees that help layer this up a little bit,
Right.
and soften the impact of it as well. It's not a solid wall of vegetation, but we also know that, you know, for people sitting on the highway side, it has nice solar exposure, but we have a lot of noise as well. So by layering it up a little bit, we help soften that relationship.
Yeah, we've actually decided to drop we had a stone wall. We've actually lowered it a little bit, but increased the height of the glass. So it's like a glass wall around that outdoor area to screen. That's mostly for noise control. So we're going to come up with a glass wall, and those are the kind of main changes that we've made in response to the comments, visual comments from the panel. There was certainly some chat about sustainability, and unfortunately Graham knows that we do a lot of passive house buildings, and we are continuing to do a lot of passive house buildings. We are aiming at step 3, but I'm going to tell you that it's probably not quite step 4, but it'll be beyond step 3, this building. And part of that is because once you've done a passive house building, you can't unsee all the problems with normal construction. So we're really trying to deal with thermal bridging and some of those kinds of details. I have now got permission to look at an electrical-based hot water system. We're just not sure if we're going to do a sewage-based one or whether we're going to air source heat pump-based one, but one of those two systems will go into the building. So we are now going to basically do energy switching. The only thing I haven't gotten was I haven't got the stoves to electric yet, they're still gas. But other than that, we have now made the major impact of this building will be all electric. So we've done some energy switching, which I think is really the right thing to be doing, and we're trying to do that in all of our buildings. And so that's that piece. We also talk a lot about social sustainability, and really the project really was very much planned around that idea that we have this small retail space that I see as a real asset to the project. It's really an amenity in my mind. It's a place that we can have some gatherings, and we certainly see that the parking lot as being something that could be closed off for a little festival or a farmer's market or those kinds of events. And we're going to surface it with a nice material so that it's not an asphalt parking lot. It's got a nice feel to it. So the commercial piece is one of the pieces I would talk about, social sustainability. We have created a very distinctive child's play area, and Peter will talk to that in a few minutes. An outdoor one, and it's related to an indoor area that's really got a family focus to it, because families need different types of space than adults do, and sometimes adults want to get away, and sometimes they like to be with the families, and it depends on what stage your life is. So we've tried to do a project that kind of looks after those life stages as well as we can. And then we have our amenity space, which is really about well-being and red light therapy rooms and saunas and cold plunge pools and hot tubs, and then the kind of co-working aspect of the space that we put in, and then the yoga aspect of the space that we put in. So we've tried to think about sustainability as energy switching and as this kind of social sustainability is our major focus. In terms of water, because we always talk about that, it was always our, usually if you put retention in, it's really for the intent of taking a load off of the city infrastructure. In this case, we don't really put a load on the city infrastructure in terms of water, storm water, because we go right into the ocean, which is a fantastic reservoir. So we weren't intending, other than making sure the water is treated on its way through, we haven't got any plans at the moment for any retention. Then the other piece becomes reuse. And so there's two issues to that. One is charging the ground with water that comes off the site. That's always a bit tricky because sometimes you put it in and then you pump it back out in your drain tile. So that's got to be a bit careful there. And the other one is, water reuse. So the question is, if you're going to use the water for reuse, it's either for irrigation or it's flushing toilets typically. And I'm not, I'll admit, I'm not a big fan of it when one has a large central system that a city provides. I think being careful about water use and trying to use local fixtures, all those aspects are important. But I must say, I've always been worried about, I know how much pumping energy is. It's very, very intensive when you pump water and you store it in tanks and you pump it. It's a very energy intensive piece, and I'm not convinced in my mind in any way that it's the right thing to do. Plus there's all those costs to the strata of maintaining that. So I must admit, if I was in the middle of the desert, it'd be different. I'd have to give you a total different answer, but in Squamish, that would be my take. I would rather spend the money on other aspects of the project and sustainability aspects of the project. And I think that's pretty much the response to what's come out. Maybe Peter could talk a bit about our children's play area. Got a slide for that?
Yeah.
Actually,
Well, you can talk about the edge.
yeah, a fair amount of work has been done since the last meeting on the Mamcombe blind and the interface with that. We've been working with our environmental consultant, Cascade, to actually look at two options for that waterfront, and it has to do with land ownership. The one on the left is as if the property line doesn't exist. The one on the right addresses the property line issue. So both of them are achievable. The one on the right has a bit of retaining wall, and you'll see that in sections in a second. The one on the left, we don't have a retaining wall, and that sort of transitional planting, that one we typically find on the edge of this tidal pool, would come in either way. So similar plant material, just different volumes, different layout in the way they are. And you can see quickly in the sections there, the ones on the left, the upper one is as if there is no property line issue, so we just have a very simple planted slope that interfaces with the blind. The lower one shows a small retaining wall system immediately adjacent to the multi-use path, and a quicker transition into the blind itself. We also show here the fencing that's proposed for along that edge. It's something we're working with the district on to make sure everyone's happy with it. But I think our last discussion was we were concerned about keeping pets out of that interface there, because the whole idea is to create habitat here, and we have to keep dogs and such out of there in order to allow that to thrive. So that section, there's the kids' play area. It's immediately adjacent to the indoor amenity space, which Scott was referring to. And it's a fairly good-sized space. The idea was to introduce some fairly robust natural elements in climbers and nets and such, and then a few focal elements, and I think you can see those here. You can see the rocks and the logs. We have a red archway, and then we have this hut system that is a little bit of a custom design deals with almost like a teepee burner, I hate to say it, but that's where it was built off of, so it's fairly, it reflects a bit of the logging industry in the area, and it's a robust space and a great place for kids to hang out and socialize. We got planting plans coming out of here, so big site with a lot of plants used. The whole idea, as was referred to in the beginning, most of this project is on arcade or on slab. We do an awful lot of that work, that's what we do. And what we've done over the years is we've been increasing our soil volumes over top of slab as much as possible in order to have some water retention and adequate room for the trees to grow and establish themselves. So as you look through the sections here, you'll see that whenever we're on slab, we have lots of growing medium, and of course it will be irrigated using high efficiency irrigation systems. Plant materials selected so that they aren't water hogs. They're adaptive type plants. A lot of them are natives and would suit this space quite nicely. And if you could, yeah. And we've done a fairly extensive study on the edges and the site itself in order to make sure that we have maintained those soil values as needed. Maybe towards the end.
This is a full set.
There's a full set. This is going to take too long. There's a number of green roofs that we've incorporated, which help with stormwater. There you go, some sections there. You can see that we've got some pretty generous soil volumes, even in the on-slab areas, the on-grade areas, sorry, and then through. Yeah, those are all on grade. You can start to see.
There's actually, the majority of the landscaping actually is on grade in this particular case. There's just that one.
It's all the edges and things.
Yeah, the edges that are, yeah.
So I think when we've gone through, we've studied all the interfaces. Tree retention along the edges is important, and we will be putting a tree management plan together before any earth starts to be moved. And we've looked at, the dike, or the multi-use trail that goes out to the new Red Bridge, some structures that will overlook the blind. A lot of those things have been explored and shown in the drawing sets that we present.
All right, I think that's pretty much the majority of our presentation. Welcome to have panel.
Okay. Thanks very much. We will do a round of questions on what we've heard so far and what we're seeing. Start with Graham.
Sure, great. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for bringing this back so quickly. I think most of my questions were kind of addressed. Thanks for bringing up sustainability. I didn't see it in the report, so thanks for noting that. So maybe just to get clarification, so sustainability, you're still going with the step 3, which I think was noted last time was commendable.
I'll call it an enhanced step 3. I don't think we can get to step 4. And we're not doing the energy modeling within our own office, so it's a little harder to, it's our mechanical consultants that are doing it in this particular case. We're aiming for an enhanced, I'll call it an enhanced step 3. I don't think we can get to 4, but we're looking at trying to make sure we got good air tightness details. We're looking at making sure that, a lot of the, we've over-insulated beyond slab edges so that we've dealt with those kind of thermal transitions that, like I said, once you've seen one and you understand them, you just start to naturally do some of those things. So we're doing our best to, I'd call it enhanced. I won't commit that we're going to get all the way to step 4.
So since the last application or proposal, the change would be that you're got more direction to go towards
the energy switching of the hot water. Energy switching of the hot water is the major change. Mm-hmm. We are also, just from, overheating is becoming a big deal. And what I found in our first passive house buildings is, 3 feet of overhang on a 6-foot window is hardly worth doing. It just doesn't work. So unless you're doing exterior shading, you're going to have to do something else. We are putting, we're going to be putting in fans, actually big ceiling fans. because we are finding that that air movement makes a significant difference in how comfortable people feel when something gets a little warm, which is going to happen.
And you are using some of the energy efficient envelope efficiencies?
Yes, yes. And we'll be using a low solar heat gain glass on the windows. We're going to try to actually lower the solar heat gain. I think it'll be more of an issue.
Like a triple pane or?
I haven't gotten to triple yet.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
I haven't gotten to triple.
Okay, that's great, thanks. And just the massing variation, I think there was some commentary about the repetitive form, so your main move is that granite.
We're trying to, yeah, we debated, we felt that if we kind of anchored the middle of the building and tried to split it into two pieces, that it would, and use the color as well to do that, that would start to answer that concern. Again, it's, you know, the building is experienced more from the street along the townhouses and where the scale is much lower. So we were, you know, it's a big building, but we layered it quite a bit. I don't know, and we really actually liked where we were. So that's kind of what our intention is.
Okay, just last question to landscape about the child's play area, and just if you could talk a bit more about the location. You have the amenity building over on the far side, outdoor play area here, there's some adjacencies with the family rec room and the tea lounge, but
Yeah.
maybe talk about why it's where it
We
is.
chose that location primarily because it had to do with the interior amenity space for kids.
Mhm.
And the one at the other end of the building is more adult-oriented,
Mhm.
where this one was family-oriented, so that's why the kids' play area was located there. It has reasonable solar, it has some pretty good views from there over to the blind. And it does tie into the fire access route, which is also a huge component for kids' play as well, because it gives us the access to that whole interior courtyard, which has pathways in it, has seating areas, so the kids can use that entire space.
And it's
Yeah.
got a gentle slope, right? So you can be able to ride your skateboards down there and stuff like that.
Did you consider it at both ends, given it's quite a bit of family-oriented housing, it's quite a bit of units? Did you consider it at both locations?
No, the focus was trying to concentrate that sort of activity there,
Mhm.
so that, and then the other one was a little bit, yeah, it's a different space, so
Sure.
we didn't want to mix the uses.
Okay, thanks.
Having said that, I mean, there are all kinds of little
Oh, yeah.
small opportunities throughout the common space where people
Yeah.
could play, you know, have a game of basketball, or there are a lot of little individual opportunities for people.
Because we were
little
even
kids
looking
too.
at that
Yeah.
space where the fire truck backs up and turns around, we put a basketball hoop in. So we have those opportunities all over that central courtyard to do so.
I think by keeping the cars out of the central courtyard, we've really made it a whole area available for kids' play that's very safe. Parents are going to be very comfortable having their kids out there. Really, that's really was so much a focus of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's my final question.
Thanks.
Sure. I missed the first presentation, so.
So sorry about
but,
that.
yeah.
Should have asked.
No, that's okay. So hopefully I don't ask any questions that were covered in the
That's
first
fine.
presentation. But yeah, is there any concern with the loading dock location not being sort of I don't know, close proximity to the highway? Like if
Well,
that is going to be used, or
Well, one of the issues was we have to have a certain distance off the highway before we can even have an entrance into the site. So that's already at kind of minimum what we were, so really, as soon as we get off the site, that's where the loading is. There's never a good place for loading when you haven't got a lane. And we just felt that was the best. We were associating it with the entrance to the parkade and trying to make it really really almost a stop-off space, but it has access to the garbage, and then it has access to walk through the parkade, and we can deliver into the backs of all the stores. That was actually a comment that came out last time too, and we've tried to address that with some doors in the parkade and some potential access corridors from there into the back of all the retail spaces. So.
and then question about for the commercial area, bike parking, you know, in sort of proximity to town, if that's something, I think I saw.
We should have done it,
Okay.
and we will do it. Peter's cycles about 60 kilometers a day, I'm sure, so he's not going to let us forget.
Okay. Say covered if possible, or covered if you desire.
That's a good idea, actually, yeah, so we'll do that. We will commit to that. We'll have it covered. we're also thinking about putting a public bike repair station somewhere in that retail courtyard area. We've been researching a couple of them that have the tools and the pumps and everything all hanging on it. And we thought that'd just be great. It's kind of the culture of the neighborhood, so that's one of our plans as well.
That's pretty much it for me right now. Thanks.
Mike?
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any questions.
I have questions. Can you tell me which units are going to be
Accessible?
accessible?
Which ones? Well, there's 10% in the total project, and they are a type. Do we have the types here?
Actually, let me just go over.
Yeah.
Maybe B3.
There are different.
It is B3.
Yeah.
But there's also bedrooms. We've adapted
Two different designs.
the common 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom design and reconfigured it to meet the adaptability requirements.
Yeah. So it's the same area, but the way the kitchen is configured is different because there's a requirement to have a continuous counter between the stove and the fridge and the sinks and some of those kinds of issues. So we have, and obviously the maneuverability to doors. Can you zoom in on any of those?
Yeah.
The overall perimeter of those units is the same as
Yes.
the non-adaptable units. So they'll be sprinkled throughout.
Yeah.
So it's this.
And I think it's 10%. Is that right,
It's-
Carrie?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what our guidelines speak to, yeah.
It's the B3F, is it? Is it the B3F?
Well, it's the B3 and then, yeah,
There's an adaptable version of it.
yes.
I don't know if it's on that particular view. But there's a stack of them anyways. We did go through it, and it is our intention to do that, shall we say.
And then these are all for purchases.
They're all for purchase.
So if somebody's pre-purchasing, are they able to have a real shower versus a bathtub?
I can't see why that wouldn't be possible. Yeah. We actually do, most of our units, if it's a 2-bedroom unit, we will have put a shower in the master and a tub in the 2nd bedroom. That's typically how we would do a 2-bedroom. In a 1-bedroom, I know I'd order mine with a shower every time, but my wife would order one with a tub every time.
Who's going to lose?
So. I'm going to
Get a
lose.
2-bedroom.
I'm going to lose. Yeah. So.
Okay, and then my next question is about the play structures. You've got this rubberized surfacing around the play area. Is there consideration for the larger of the 2 huts to be able to be wheeled into and turn around space for them?
We can make that
Because
happen.
it looks like it's going to be 2 wheels at least.
Yeah, no, there's plenty of room in those huts to get a wheelchair in, so we'll make sure they're accessible.
And then underneath those, the rings, are they, I'm just confused as to where they are relative to the play structure.
They're on the pathway that runs just along the edge of the play structure. So it's part of the area.
Oh, it's part of,
separate
so
to-
underneath the, is it, so it's, oh, there they are.
It's right there. So it is accessible. It's the pathway through those.
Great.
Yeah, you can see it there on the screen.
Yeah. Cool. Those are all my questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. My only question is about the foreshore. Could you bring that section up?
Sure.
I guess I'll ask the question while you're bringing it up. Without access to crown lands, does that straight line become a sheet pile wall? Is that the?
No, it still is a transitional.
I just,
The
yeah,
wall goes up.
on the cross section, it just doesn't show PL.
Yeah, I know, but if you look at the lower section,
Yeah,
the wall goes adjacent to the multi-use trail. That's where the boulder wall will go.
right.
And the rest will just slope down to the blind, so there's no sheet
So
pile.
that looks like a PL there on the, isn't that the PL? That
No,
dotted
it's
line?
That's high water.
High water.
Oh, that's high water.
Yeah.
Which is similar.
And then,
Well, yeah.
so I guess I see you put soil there.
Yes.
Is there no requirement for riprap or any type of kind of hard scour protection in that area?
No, we're going to plant everything.
Okay,
Because it's fairly flat.
right.
Like, if it were steeper, yes, but because it's so flat, it's less than 3 to 1, so.
Right.
So we're okay.
And have you done your final flood, like, are you aware, of what is the FCL for this site?
Flood
5?
elevation?
Yeah, 5 meters. So we're having to bring the site up about meter 2, meter 3 from its current grade. The road's coming up. That's one of the reasons that it's a challenge, because the road's already kind of on the edge and we're having to raise it.
But if you look at these sections where the heavy fill color changes, that's where existing grade is.
Right.
Yeah,
So this is all built on top of that.
yeah.
The road is at 4.3 and our FCL is at 5.
Okay. Okay, that's all for me.
Yeah, I missed the first one as well, so I apologize if I ask any duplicate questions, but the loading bay that's next to P2 parking access, can that accommodate any type of commercial vehicle, or is it capped to a certain size?
It takes a large vehicle. I can't remember how long we made it, Joe, but it's a decent vehicle. I mean, it's not going to take a semi, but it'll take a decent vehicle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty good sized loader, bigger than what we did last
How does the filing work with the bollards?
Oh, the bollards in terms of,
They're lockable.
yeah,
So the fire department has a key.
Key.
Yeah, so they collapse and they can drive through.
Okay.
I've seen the ones in Europe that go down in the
Yeah.
ground,
Yeah,
but I have a feeling it's snow country. I don't know.
No, it doesn't work.
Just a quick question about visitor parking. Is there visitor parking underground?
Yes, so there are 2 visitor parking areas. When you go in that one by the loading dock,
Yeah.
that's a mixed visitor and residential parking area. Now, the gates might not be quite in the right place to get the numbers balanced, but we will get them there.
Okay.
And then there's a second one, there's another entrance off Scott Crescent just behind the amenity building, and there's another parking area there. So the idea is that if you were, say, going to the amenity building or a guest at an event there, you could park in that one, and then the other one is really related to the retail space. So there's visitor parking in 2 locations.
Okay. Is there a letdown area in front of the townhouses, or why does the road widen there? Is that
It's parking, curbside parking.
So that's sort of purpose parking.
Part of that was when we talked about slowing cars down. If you have cars parked along the edge and you have some, it doesn't feel like a freeway,
Oh,
and
yeah.
trying to keep the lanes narrow. That was all part of the idea, is trying to keep the traffic slower.
And then the sort of pedestrian crossing of Scott Crescent there, like I pedal past there every day. Are there going to be some lights or something because if there's 400 cars coming out there at 8 a.m. at the moment I just pedal straight past there.
You know, that hasn't come up in our discussions, but a valid point. I think we can certainly consider it. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be. The cars, you know, at the end of the day, when we did our traffic study, it really isn't that high a volume of cars. Like there's a peak hour where there's a little bit, but it wasn't as significant as one would believe, though. Just hard to understand sometimes, yeah. But we actually had a pretty detailed traffic study done by Bunt and Associates, and it was all part of the public hearing. And
Okay.
it really wasn't as heavy as you think.
I think it's 1 car every 30 seconds at the peak hour.
Yeah.
I don't remember
Something
whether
like that,
that's
yeah.
Morning or evening.
I remember because he said, "Here's a car," and then he held his watch.
Karen?
I'll just ask that the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, when this came through rezoning, had a list of conditions that are still just being reviewed around that intersection too. So with these final designs, we're still working through some of those aspects. So
Yeah.
it's not a no that might be required.
Yeah,
and
also-
and I would say sometimes it's not a requirement, it's just good planning, and because I've cycled there for 2 years and I've never seen a car there, so 1 every 30 seconds would be
Right.
quite.
Right. The other thing that's happening is we're trying to locate a bus stop along there, and there's some discussion as to where it's going to be located, and it'll affect our parking, but we're also then hoping to pick up a line of trees between the road and the channel as you approach the bridge there. And we're just trying to get that worked out right now. We're just waiting for alignments of roads and things to get that sorted out.
Okay. Two more questions. The park that is the green space that's across the way from the cycle path, what is that? Is that just flat?
Right now, it's existing regrowth,
Yeah.
and we're just going to keep that and then work the pathway on the lower and upper side of it, but try to keep the natural vegetation as it is in the middle, and we'll deal with the transitions. The idea there is to create the path so we can take it to a kayak launch.
All right.
So that's what that float is out into the blind there. Is in the kayak.
That's part of the reason we wanted the curbside parking, was so that the public could, bring your kayak on your roof and launch it off of that kayak launch. So that's part of the thinking behind that.
And last question, what is the soffit material?
It's a product called, we can't use wood because of the fire things, but believe it or not, this plastic-like material we can use. So it's, that's it there, that's the product we're going to use. It's called Sagpiper, Sagaper or something. Anyways, it's, we wanted something, we really did want that kind of natural wood feel to it, and I guess, how can I explain? That was the best interpretation that you could find. I'll put it that way. But anyways, and it meets the fire requirements that we had to meet.
My questions.
Thank you. So with regards to the green roofs, it looks that they're located above the two commercial buildings on the south side of the project. Is there any additional, or those are the locations?
Yes, there's some little townhouses that now have green roofs too.
Yeah.
There's also the connection above the, like, you're not seeing it in this plan, but is that?
Yeah, those are the ones.
green.
Yeah, those are green roofs.
Yeah, but that's a continuous
Yeah,
green roof.
yeah, it's just the way it's
Yeah,
drawn.
you can sort of see it there. Yeah.
So with consideration to the rest of the roof surfacing, was there consideration to urban heat island and the materiality of the roofs beyond a green roof?
The uppermost roof of the building, we haven't, on the wood frame, other than where we have the roof decks, we haven't done any particular, other than we would use a low, like a gray, one of those gray finished roofings on there to try to at least reduce the amount of heat gain. But it's pretty much a standard 2-ply torch-on roof, but we'll use the light gray
Yeah,
finish.
the light colors.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So just with regards to performance of the building with those very large, lovely windows, was there consideration to how solar gain would affect those spaces in the summer, and how any sort of cladding or architectural elements that could allow for limiting the solar gain and heat into that building?
Big discussion right now on every project, and I can only say this: we did our passive house project in Vancouver called the Heights, most famous thing I'll ever do in my entire life. But anyways, it's overheating, and we have shading, and I've done some studies, and really until North America, we either got to start looking at electrochromatic glass, or we're going to have to start looking at exterior shade, like operable exterior shading like they do in Europe, or we're not going to solve this problem. So we are going to use low solar heat gain glass. We are going to put fans in the units. We have got kind of ventilation sort of through the units into the decks as much as we can, like most of the units, other than some of the one bedrooms, most of them have a reasonable way we can get some air through them. So it's an important discussion piece, and we're all trying to learn our lessons, but yeah, it's an important piece.
We did model the solar heat gain in the past, and it turns out that overall the project is oriented fairly well to not get the worst of the west and southwest solar gain. So this building is probably where it's going to be problematic, that upper part of the front face of this building. But the remainder of the project isn't going to have that problem.
Yeah.
Looking at the options of conditioning some of those spaces.
Yeah.
And the other thing, that because of the balcony requirements of 10% of the suite size, we do wind up with some deep overhangs over bedrooms and parts of the living rooms. So the balconies actually provide quite a good shading of some of the windows. So those big living room windows that kind of stick out that don't have any protection.
But the big living room windows on the top floor, we are having air conditioning in those particular.
Yeah.
So all of those penthouses will have a heat pump, which we'll then use to heat as well. But since we put it up there, we'll use it for both purposes.
Okay. You spoke about water treatment. You had mentioned that there was some form of water treatment within the project. Could you speak a bit more to that?
Yeah, basically, and really, I don't think there's anything special about this. It's just
Yeah,
the way
it's
we would do it, right? So there will be any water that comes off of the road system will go through an oil separator before it's discharged. And there'll be a second one dealing with all the parking and everything in the areas of the project. So there's one for the project and one for the public roads. That will, their oil separators designed to take the oil and grit out of the discharges. So those are, that is we are doing.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Those are all great questions so far. I've only got one, and I'm just wondering if you've fully explored that loading bay, the Hammerhead loading bay. It's such a shame. There, have you looked around the corner at the back near the rear parkade entrance on Scott Crescent? Just wondering if you, and it's still within sort of loading distance of a parcel delivery room or something.
Yeah, I mean, the only problem there is it's one story up though. Like by the time you get there, we're on the upper level of the parkade.
And you've got there's an elevator, I would assume that's.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, we could make it work.
Mm-hmm.
I just worry about whether Canada Post would do that. I'm not convinced Canada Post would allow us to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're going to want, I mean, we've looked at ideas. I mean, the other option would be to put like a curbside pull-out loading lane and use some public lands. We just weren't sure that we would be permitted to do that, which is why we did this. But if we could, if there was an opportunity to do just a curbside pull-out and reserve it as a loading area, I'd be happy to do that. So if the committee thinks that's a better way to go, we can then start discussing that with the municipality and see which way we should do it.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
May I have one more question?
Sarah?
The red trellis, it's at first level, is that going to be metal or is it?
Yeah, it's a steel beam.
Steel
That'll be
beam,
a
I-beam.
I-beam, yeah. And then a wood, we'll have to pre-drill it and then we'll anchor some wood on top. We'll give it both color and, yeah.
Thank you, that's it.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, we'll go to comments and start with Graham.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Just I'm thinking the child's play area, I'm comfortable with what's been provided there. I think it looks like a nice space for kids to be. I think, you know, there should be a consideration of in the main amenity building. I think you don't necessarily need to separate the young children and adult zones. I mean, they're going to be using them at different times of day, and just speaking also from my lived experience in townhouses like that and play areas like that, I think the positives are adjacent to the townhouses and on the walkway, so that's great. But I think having that second space where both the adults can be doing something while having eyes on the kids, I think that would be a great opportunity that you could do. Yeah, just the massing and expression of the individual buildings. I think it's getting there. The one thing I'm just getting hung up on in the DP guidelines is just individual building identity. So I think maybe if there's a way you can express the individual buildings, maybe just through color or something, that would be positive. Other than that, the commercial frontage I'm fine with, and the loading bay, I mean, I think if that can be given up and used for additional area to serve that amenity building, green space or something else, that would be great. That's all the comments I have.
Thanks.
All right. Yeah, also don't have a ton of comments. I think that likewise the loading area should be on public land. I think would be, if the district is comfortable with that, preferred, better use of space. Yeah. Yeah, I think overall comfortable with
Thanks, guys. I only have 2 comments. I think the commercial space looks, I think I wrote down, much more impactful and purposeful looking as opposed to the first one where it kind of didn't really stand out as much. Yeah, I think you guys have done a really good job with that one. And then my other one was just for the bike repair station you kind of brought up, I think, Brent, brought up the bike parking for the brewery in the commercial space. And then the bike repair station, Squamish has like probably 10 of them scattered around town, so maybe they're using that as a template because they're pretty popular in town. But other than that, yeah, I think you've addressed most of the things that we were looking for.
Yeah, I think that it looks a lot better than the first rendition. I would echo like having the buildings, maybe just push them a little bit further so they are a bit more distinct of being able to determine which building you are actually going to. I think that the trellises work as with the glass roof, and would encourage you to have the glass roof on the top of the building, on the rooftop deck as well. I mean, I think get a bit more use that way. With the adaptable units, I just wanted to make sure that there's no backing in the walls of the bathroom, so it seems at the kitchen that there isn't, that all of the sinks are across from the stoves.
In the adaptable plan, they're not. They don't have
Yeah,
it right in
if
front.
not, then I would just say have a pot filler back on the,
Yeah.
for the cooktop.
I know we read we've been we're getting a lot of this now in all the projects. We've read those guidelines and we did redesign the suites to make sure we met those guidelines.
And then additionally, just to have a pull-out like tray surface, so then you can have a wheel under surface to work on, like the tray board, so that's an easy one
Yes,
to install in those units. And then also just a consideration is that all of the, I know that it's for the simplicity of the build, but all of the faucets are on the wall past the toilet. So you've got to reach in to turn the taps on. You might want to just switch them to the other end of the bathtub so that you're not reaching quite as far. Yeah, and just to encourage you have the play structure be able to be accessible to the hut, whatever you're calling the huts. But overall, yeah, I like the changes made. Thanks.
I guess I'll refer directly to the departmental comments. I like the changes that you've made to the materials and the colors, and I encourage you to keep kind of telling the history of the site as much as possible. I think you've done that with a lot of the elements, but I didn't see it expressly called out, but I imagine it's probably in the plan, some signage to do with the history of the site. I did, actually a quick question, I did see in one of the renderings there was this funky kind of red tree coming out of the brewery, but then it wasn't on another one. Did that live or did that die?
That died while I was away.
All right. Fair enough. Well,
did you like it?
Well, it's interesting. You know, it kind of reminds me of when you drive down Granville Street, you always see those metal trees, and it sticks in your head. So
those are beautiful.
This community's got a great relationship with colored trees, so I recommend using that one. Yeah, I was walking around Westbrook Village on Monday this week, just looking at some comparables to the site that we're working on, and they put glass on top of all their trellises, and it works really, really well. It animates spaces that I think would typically not be, so yeah, integrate that, that's wonderful. I think that's fine for the stormwater management, you're dealing with it on site. I'll let the landscape architect speak to that, but I'm comfortable with that, that method of stormwater treatment. I really support the changes you've made to the play areas. Again, pulling from that kind of history of the site and some of those structures, and bringing in natural playscapes as well as some more manufactured ones. I'll say for the brewery, I just noticed that there's some staff is looking for some input on that, having worked with a few breweries. If it was to be a true brewery, I don't know how well it would function in this space. My guess would be you'd probably be attracting like a brew pub or a tap house or something like that, just because you kind of kind of want a 30-foot ceiling height if you're going to get tanks in there to really function. So I consider that if you are looking for a brewery tenant and you do want that to be there, talk to a few of them because they'll quickly rip apart all the good work that you've done, as happened to us a few times. But I think a brew pub in that location is an equally great amenity for the people living there and for the community. So if that's the intent, I think it works just fine. You had the comment about the gas, not having gas ranges go away from the plan. I'll say that from what we've been hearing from council, I think there's a lot more talk about that, and I don't know when developers are gonna start taking the torch. I'd be afraid to take that torch personally, but induction is great, and so if you want to take that first leap, maybe you can be the one to sell it to the Squamish buyers and take it off my plate. That'd be great. And the last one I'll say is for your FCL, look into what datum your report was written in, because there are various geodetic datums, and that can have an effect of a foot on your site. And I'm happy to talk to you about that if you want to.
I think that's been redone recently, so
Great.
I think we're pretty good.
Great. That's it for me.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Material, color palette, and massing. I think it's looking really good. With one small comment would be the soffit material being a plastic. There's some really nice metal ones of those, and it just gives a little bit of a more permanence than a plastic sort of soffit, especially on something like this. Really encourage, the safe crossing of that junction, because it is a main route from Valley Cliff for every pedestrian that walks into town.
Which junction are you talking about? The highway?
The one that goes across Scott Crescent,
Okay.
beside, parallel to the highway.
Right.
And then I still don't really fully buy into the loading bay next to that amenity space. I think that there's must be other places on the site, and even if there was a sort of special, I know it's also at the front of the development, but a special loading bay in front of the townhouses would be a simpler way to do it, and then that space there could be expanded with a play area for the adults to watch out the kids on, and then some screenings, and it could just such a nice corner for the development to see a Canada Post or UPS van sat there most of the day, because lots
Fair
of people
enough.
will be ordering stuff, I'm sure.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I really like the red. I think it's a really good pop of color for the trellis, and the glass on top should be really good, and some attention should be paid to LED lighting or something underneath there that could be a really cool element in that. So,
Going through staff's list, starting at the bottom of their list, with the loading bay, I agree with the comments. The location is a bit challenging, being that it's the entry of the building. And regardless of its location, I would encourage a plaza approach to it, where rather than it reading as a very specific use, its design allowing for more flexibility when it's not being used for that purpose. In terms of stormwater management, being adjacent to the ocean, and being such a precious resource, I would have liked to have seen an approach that was really thoughtful. Maybe there is some consideration for it being a salmon safe project, which is a really kind of simple way to measure the heat of the water that's being excreted back into the waterway. It really allows it to slow down and cool down, and then when it reaches into the waterway, it's in a way that the salmon are safe, is essentially what it is. So something that might be worth looking into as a potential. Outdoor covered spaces, I agree with staff. Definitely make sure that those are resistant to the climate and the rain and all that good stuff. Sounds like you're going towards that. The brewery, I do find the siting challenging. The patio space, I think, would be quite challenging to sit there with the highway. So hopefully there is an opportunity as you continue to move forward to find it, maybe it can wrap back into the site or something. Sustainability, I appreciate that a couple green roofs are coming in. I would encourage consideration for a really
direct consideration for the urban heat island and how the materiality of the roof is considered in that big picture. I would also encourage consideration to the shading of the windows and hopefully not relying so heavily on an air conditioning system, rather, some louvers and such, just to help mitigate some of that heat that we're going to see in the buildings. The form and massing, to my comments from the last panel, it to me reads as two buildings, very much so, one large building in the back and one smaller but large building in the front. And I would encourage consideration for individual identity of the buildings, just to help break that up a bit. The materiality and color is starting to differentiate them, but from a massing perspective, they really do read as two buildings to me. And then with the Mam-Clam blind, glad to hear you're working with such a great team at Cascade, and as much as possible as it could be naturalized, appreciating that property line that's a challenging one. But looks like that's on the right track with that one, so good to see. Thanks. That's my comment.
Thank you. I'm just going to go to Graham before I come back to myself.
Sure, I just only wanted to make one other comment because I talked about sustainability last time, so I think it's great that the applicant is giving more thought to that. That's great. It still sounds very aspirational at this point, so I just hope and encourage that can carry through the design and be secured as the proposal moves along. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thanks. I'll just start by saying thanks very much for coming back with some thoughtful changes and some much improved renderings so that we can really see where you're going with the visual side towards the highway and the street front. And I agree with all the comments about the retail restaurant space there. Practicality, probably not an actual functioning brewery, but more like a tap house. But it looks to be a much improved design. I think it'll work really well. Sound obviously is something you'll need to figure out, but it looks attractive from the highway as far as something's happening here and welcoming, which I think you've achieved that goal. I guess all my comments on the loading bay have been reiterated throughout the panel. I'm hoping you can find something there. And then as far as the colored tree comment, that just brings to mind that Jackie isn't here today, and I'm sure she'd want to make sure the Public Art Committee got a crack at some locations and some art throughout the site, but I'll leave that with our planning staff to work with you on. So that is it for all our comments, unless anyone has any else. Sarah?
Just with this pedestrian crossing across Scott Crescent at the highway, is with that traffic aisle separator, is as opposed to going up and down again, if you could just go through, it just makes it a lot simpler.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I'm not sure.
Well, the MOT has done it. They ended up having to grind out a whole bunch of curbs, so.
Fair enough. I would agree. We'll watch for that as we see the civil drawings develop.
And then with this seating that's throughout, I mean, it looks like it's all sort of this flat bench-like, but I would encourage you to maybe have some backs on a couple of those benches and an armrest, just have a variety of seating options. Thanks, that's it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so as far as recommendations, I'm not going to read through the whole list again because I believe we'll probably pick one of the following two, which is that the advisory design panel supports the project and does not need to see this project returned for further review, or B, that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. I'll throw it out to the table whether it should be a full approval or B with recommendations.
Well, I think B is
More appropriate.
more appropriate in looking at where that building may move or.
Yeah, okay. I agree.
like,
Anyone else?
stack.
Okay, so we'll move for B, recommendation B. That the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the recommendations that we have summarized. Can I have someone move that? Sarah? Second? Carlos? All in favor? Against? Unanimous? And thank you very much.
You
Good luck with
actually helped
everything.
the project, so thank you.
Thanks. And thank you for coming in for this meeting, just for us.
That was the outcome.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we're back. So we're just, at one small short item that I'd like to just bring forward to the group here is that just with the notion of trying to come up with a better end product as far as recommendations that council end up reading. In the past, we've talked about things like prioritizing the long list of comments that we come up as we go around the table so that it reads a little bit better. I'm sure you've all looked in the minutes and just seen a myriad of comments, and given the context of the discussion, there's quite often 5 to 10 of those that are actually really much more important than the rest of the grouping. And so I've just thrown it out to planning staff that is there a way that we can find some kind of method of either prioritizing or pulling the important points up so that council really gets a better sort of view of the recommendations, easier reading for them, easier to see what the context of the discussion was. And so that's with planning right now, and I just wanted to make the group aware. And if anyone else has any ideas as to how we could improve or any comments as to the process of how we achieve our end result, then possibly we could bring it up in a future meeting together with planning.
Yeah, it was pretty apparent to me because I missed this last Redbridge, so I asked for the minutes from the last one, and they were so wide-ranging that even I couldn't understand. I couldn't work out what the recommendation was. So, or the thought. There were so many thoughts. So I don't know how council does that part.
Right. How is it communicated to council and followed
Do they just get
right to public hearing? But is it verbatim or minutes are attached to the?
Yeah.
I believe the minutes come in as attached.
And if they're really keen, they can watch the video.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
get, like accepted by
Yeah.
council?
Maybe like it's a bit more admin, but if you could do like a ranked version of that, like a doodle poll, where you go online and it's. I only say that because I often feel like you get this collection and then it's probably worth a discussion to pare some of that down because there are a lot of wide-ranging opinions. And on other ADPs that will get trimmed down quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's something that's contentious, there'll be a vote there, and say the half of the panel agrees, the half of the panel doesn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I just think that it's best to do it when we're all around the table. The only thing that's not great about that is that sometimes people's opinions get, pushed to the background.
And we run along, which we're already sort of verging on our time limits with 2 projects in any one meeting, so. Yep.
Just to your point, do you know what process they use is it a doodle poll, or what process have you heard of or seen in other ADPs?
Other ADPs, they just said, like, typically I think there are more established ADPs where I think a lot of us are new to this panel, and so they just kind of, the chair typically reads out, like, it's kind of keeping tally, I think, which, and then at the end is like, this is what I heard, am I right? Right, which is an additional task for you if you feel up to it, but, these are the main 5 things that you need to, or 10 things you need to do.
Yeah.
Am I right about these 10, and what are the most important ones?
Yeah, that's in my experience. Been the chair is given the top 5, and then there's a bit of a discussion, maybe an add or subtract to that list. And
So at the end of the comments that
when it comes
occurs,
back to you, you give your comments. Yeah, it's more pressure on you, but it works pretty good if you can summarize quickly.
Because that helps find out the unanimous comments.
Right.
And that can be the top of the list.
Okay.
And then other comments that other people have
Okay.
can probably go underneath that so that council can quickly see who everyone was in agreement with this, but there was these other conflicting comments or something.
Or also even just going through and with her chart of what staff concerns are, if previous, prior to the minutes being taken, if those questions are put on there, and then the comments as we go around and give them of support or not support of those particular items that you're comments on.
Yeah.
Maybe faster.
I do see a value in doing it in this format as opposed to a second process that happens outside this format, because I think there's value in being able to have the discussion live to get to that synthesized set of recommendations, whereas I think once it happens offline, that not only could it be challenging for staff to kind of summarize for you, there's that interpretation piece, but also the timing of getting responses from, it may be hard to get in a timely fashion to a synthesis, where and it is additional pressure on you, so a little bit of, but it might be, if it's possible to do in the moment, that may be the most effective way with the best result. But it's an additional pressure.
I would just worry from a committee perspective of people going away, giving it sober second thought, and then adding new things into their comments, which puts us at risk as a committee. It's better, I agree, having the discussion.
Well, they're
That's
always
real
still
busy as
brought
well.
back to the next meeting for review and
Sure.
approval, right?
Yeah.
So, and if people are able to absorb those when they're at their desk or when they have their own time to concentrate on it, rather than in the flow, that's the advantage I was kind of looking for.
Right.
I've found that in past iterations of advisory design panel, because I've done quite a few, we have tried the method that you're talking about, and sometimes it's functioned and sometimes it's just gotten more confusing than ever. So,
that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
Because I think there's some aspects of design that just come down to preference, and there's some aspects of design that come down to like our various backgrounds and what should be happening and what isn't being presented.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's such a bad thing for that discussion, like you said, to be open.
Yeah.
I think to Sarah's point, having because the planners work so hard to create these really incredible lists of their understanding of the project and using that as an outline, and we maybe make an effort to make sure that we do, whether we hit all those points or not, we know that outline, and then as we're going around the table, making sure that you're covering those critical ones, even if it's just to say, I echo Graham's comments, so that you, the chair, can go, another vote was, in support of X or against X.
Yep.
And then it gives a nice overall, because often, someone might comment on something, you go, oh, well, they said it's fine, but that doesn't show the gravity of the comment, whether it's positive or constructive.
Yeah,
right?
I totally agree, but only as indicated, not like
Yeah.
a score, because there's some
Yeah,
things
yeah.
I'm not professionally
Exactly.
able to comment on.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
More thought and discussion and Jonas.
Yeah. does
Yeah,
that have
absolutely.
preference?
Just
I don't want to keep that.
So we've been evolving this. I've been here for 4 years now and presenting to this panel, and we have been continuously evolving it. We have tried to do a summary at the end where the chair does try to pick up those key comments. It's never perfect. As staff, when I look at those key comments, if some are missed, it's not forgotten from the applicant, it's not forgotten from staff.
No.
We are still trying to pay attention to those pieces, but it just does highlight and summarize some of those key pieces that we can show to council. So it's not to say that they're sometimes missed, but we try to do our best to capture all of it. And again, if it's left to staff and there's opposing sides, it's if you have agreed to say B, this goes back to staff, it's kind of up to the staff and applicant to make that decision, and then ultimately it's council that makes that final decision.
Yeah.
So,
And we're always going to disagree. Right?
yeah, there's always going to
Red
be
versus
that.
green is always going to.
So we could try to go back to a model where you do try to summarize it.
I think, it's not so much trying to change what has been said, but it's just like David mentioned, if you come in from the outside and you weren't at the meeting and you look at those minutes, your eyes go blurry. And so just a way to clean that up, hopefully, is all the goal is. So, yeah.
Well, it comes down to the summarization rather than,
Well, we've tried methods where, the note taker is repeating every single comment, which is also not efficient.
Yeah, and the contradictory comments appear and nobody knows, if you're the reader, you don't know what the context was. But not complaining at all about the notes, which I think are amazing. It's just there's a lot of them. So, thanks, man. Okay, we will, it's motion to close the meeting now.
So that's, sorry, just to
unless
so
you-
you put it to staff to give us comments?
It's
or we're gonna discuss it again?
it's sitting with Jonas right now,
Okay.
and so we can pull it up for a future discussion point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the guidance staff gives with the key questions, so I would agree that we focused on those things and we summarized around that, plus whatever else we say. That seems like a good
Yeah.
approach.
Would it also be useful to have, maybe when the minutes are being taken down and are being taken verbatim, or what would be said, is to then actually afterwards is to try and classify them into like, you know, form versus materials versus.
That was my idea with looking at them after they've been collected, and
But
then.
that would be a staff job as opposed to us.
Yeah, I don't know if you probably want the panel to be managing the context of what the comments group into and what they mean as far as context, but then it starts to get really tricky and difficult. So this is not an easy task, but I guess the goal is just to try and make a better product for council, you know, so.
Yeah, and I think the grouping side of things, we can definitely do that at the council meeting report and summary. I think we're capable to do some of that, but where I think the highlight for us and sometimes the discrepancy is, did most of the panel want to see this change, or did just, you know, one person, did the whole panel agree to these things? So, and sometimes that's a conversation with the applicants after, well, we just heard it from one person and we don't think it's, you know, so some of that conversation happens, and so it would be really great to just, yes, I think summarize what staff has put together, yes, no to those comments, or, you know, categorize those pieces, and then if there's other comments that have been brought up, summarize those major ones. Do we all kind of agree with it? I think it's okay if not everyone agrees to it, but if we've got majorities, then it's really helpful for staff to say, okay, yes, that's one that we're going to show council. And at the end of the day, they may choose not to use those, and that's our job to present that to council to say that they have not met that condition.
Yeah.
So that's what we do to try to summarize those pieces.
Okay. Yeah.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay. Second. Okay. All in favor? Okay. Thanks very much.